Hey folks, it's Ray with Taste Radio. Right now I am speaking with Matt Parry, who is the founder and CEO of The Good Crisp. Matt, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I was just munching on your chips this afternoon, and
Nice.
I'm such an idiot because I forgot, for the video, I should have at least had a canister with me, but I finished the canister. I think I had like a half of one left, and they lasted 10 minutes. So sorry, I don't have it on video, folks, but you're rocking the great logo on your T-shirt there, so that helps.
I'll represent. I've got you.
Well done. Now, folks listening will certainly hear your accent, and most people will associate it with an Australian accent. I hope people don't think it's a Kiwi accent because you are not from New Zealand, and there's a little bit of a divide there. Maybe not a little bit of a big divide between the people of New Zealand and Australia. So
they're just very jealous of us, right? So it's difficult, but we deal with it.
Yeah. How long have you lived in the States?
So I moved here with my 3 daughters and my wife, 2019, started that. So 2.5 years now.
2.5 years. Are you enjoying life stateside, or are you missing the life in Australia?
No, we're loving it here. It's been good. We're here in Boulder, Colorado. So a nice place to end up for sure. I mean, to be honest, like a lot of people, we've struggled a bit the last sort of, 18 months, 12 months, obviously, with what's going on. That's been tough, not being able to have family visit or see people from Australia. The kids haven't seen their grandparents in sort of 2 years now, things like that. So it's been the toughest part, but, we're still enjoying it. We're still having a great time.
Yeah, as long as you're with family, that's the most important thing for sure. As long as everyone's safe and healthy. But I'm sure there are some things you miss about Australia. What are some of the biggest differences between living here and living in Australia, and what do you miss most about living down under?
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's not too bad. It's not like it's a radically different culture or language or anything like that here in the US. So it's been all right. I think moving to Colorado, it's tough being in a landlocked state. We've never done that before. I've always lived by the beach. It's a big part of life in Australia. So that's probably one of the most difficult things that we miss here. But then again, we have amazing snow and we take full advantage of that here. So not a lot that we've missed. It's still been pretty exciting living here.
That's good. That's good to hear. I've never been to Australia, and I hear amazing things about it. I've been to Boulder. That's an amazing place. Boulder, Colorado is a great place to live. I would assume, just from having visited there for a short time. But the idea for the Good Crisp originated in your homeland. Let's talk about that. What was the genesis of this brand? How did you come to found the Good Crisp?
Yep, certainly. Well, I've always worked in CPG. So I had another company back in Australia where we imported other food products from around the world and we sold them into Australia. And so I launched lots of different brands there in Australia and always knew I was going to launch my own food product, which is sort of waiting for the right idea and the right time. And that came along probably about 8 years ago when I started the company. I was originally helped launch some canister chips into the Australian market and took a deep dive in all of that and got to really understand the players in the industry and really saw this opportunity of, essentially a better for you alternative to Pringles and to other canister chips out there. I myself was on a pretty strict FODMAP diet. I have some food intolerances, so I was really missing a lot of the snacks that I wanted to eat, and also as well wanted to give my kids as a child of the 90s. I grew up eating all of that stuff, and my parents, like a lot of parents, were enamored with all of that junk food and putting all the science and all the chemicals into the food. We all thought it was a good thing. We now know that definitely isn't the case, and so tried to develop some of those familiar snacks, but taking all of that nasty stuff out. And I wanted to do it in the canister chip segment.
Yeah, and the decision to launch in the United States, what was the reason behind that?
We always got interest, even from day one when we launched in Australia, sort of out of the US, and people asking about it. I was familiar with the US market because I'd imported, looked at it to import brands into Australia from it. So had been to Expo West, had done it. So the more sort of requests we got or inquiries, I thought, you know what? I think it was about 2016. I thought, look, I'll mock up some packaging. I'll get a table at Expo West. I'll go there. I'll just put my products out there and see what people think. See if there's a genuine interest here. I thought it was a good way to to do a whole lot of market sampling with the thousands of people that come there, but also there's there's industry people there and they can give me some feedback as well. So I just went and did it, and sort of people would walk past and stop in the tracks and come back a bit and say, is that what I think it is? Is this a better for you Pringle or a better for you canister chip? And so by the end of the show, I just knew there was a massive opportunity that for my product. There was nothing else like it in the market here in the US. And, whether or not I could make it happen, or I was the one that could bring it to fruition, still remained to be found out. But I just knew that definitely there was a big enough opportunity here. And there was the retailers here to make it work. One of the problems with Australia is we're a big country. We're physically the same size as the US, but with only 25 million people. So there's only a handful of grocery chains and things like that. So it is hard to get your foot in and to build it. Whilst here in the US, there's such a strong established a natural network and natural category that were really interested in my product, that it gave us the opportunity to really start to build it.
And we love our snack food here in the United States
that
sure.
As well.
Yeah. I'm sure listeners are wondering why I haven't asked about Pringles yet, because you've mentioned it a couple of times. And I'm sure anytime someone sees a canister of the Good Crisp, they're like, oh, it's a better for you Pringles. That being said, I'm sure there are questions about, well, what kind of due diligence did you do to avoid potential lawsuits from the makers of Pringles?
Yeah. Look, it was certainly something I first, when I looked into it, as I mentioned, I did a bit of a deep dive into the category, and those things became very immersed in it. And it quickly became obvious that there was already, Walmart had a canister chip all around the world. There's different sort of retailer private label out there of versions, and that any trademarks or IP had since all expired or anything like that. So there's no real concerns from that side of things. We're not infringing on anything. So we had free reign to go out and to develop a product, which is important.
That's really interesting, because if Walmart had a canister of potato chips and there were other private label varieties, one would think, well, why didn't anyone else jump on this opportunity for a branded, better for you canister of chips? Were there other attempts to create a branded product like yours?
There was one out in the market that had sort of done something, but really, I mean, it's an obvious question. I get asked it a lot. I mean, I certainly wasn't the only one in the world that thought of this idea. I guess what helped me bring it to life was my connections in the industry. I mean, there's only a handful of canister chip manufacturers in the world. Pringles has done such a good job of sort of controlling that there isn't a lot out there, and I had good relationships with those and was able to bring it to life. I think the other part of it is, up until the last 5-10 years, there hasn't been that big enough demand and better for you snacking and that macro movement into health that's allowed for, to innovate above what was out in the market. So most of the innovation was around price and private label. And when, the market leader's already $1.50 out there, it doesn't leave sort of much room for sort of cheap. So I think just it was a timing factor as well, that now suddenly there's enough of a market that we can innovate above and be a better for you alternative and still have enough mass appeal to make a company like this work.
Yeah, a better for you alternative, but to a specific brand. Again, I think, the obvious comparison is to Pringles. Do you have to continue to use their brand name to describe yours? Is there another way to do it?
It's one of those interesting sort of categories. It's like Kleenex or whatever, like where the brand is synonymous with the category to some degree. I mean, canister chips is technically the category, but there's one brand that owns 95% of that category. And so they are interchangeable to some degree. It's one of those situations. Look, we don't worry too much about it. We're running our own race to some degree. Our customers are not Pringles customers. And so we just do our own thing. It's just one of those situations where the brand can be replaced for the category in itself.
Now, early on, I think some people described the Good Crisp as a knockoff brand. And, it's not a fair thing to say, because it's certainly not the exact same thing as a Pringles. But how did you fight that stigma of it being sort of a fake kind of Pringles?
For sure. Well, we're what's interesting, Raz, we're part of this, better for you snacking 2.0 sort of movement where, traditionally there's always been this play off where if you're healthy, you have to sacrifice taste or sacrifice something else. the reality is we beat every other canister chip, Pringles included, in blind taste testing. We taste better, we're better quality, and then also you have all the benefits of better ingredients there. So in fact, we're actually better than them. So if anything, they're the knockoff of us. And what we're doing, we're now the market standard and the highest sort of point there. So it's a really great position to be in. We no longer have to talk about sacrifice or, hey, yeah, it's healthy, it doesn't taste good, but it's better for you. There's actually no compromise from a consumer's viewpoint. And that's been a really powerful thing that we've been able to talk about instead of, having to reference back about what you're mentioning.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to my next question, which is about the idea of the good crisp and where it belongs in retail, because it has all the hallmarks of a natural brand that belongs in conventional, and that kind of duality can be difficult, I think. How did you initially navigate the retail channels that you thought the brand belonged in and where it would actually succeed?
Yeah, it's been a journey for us. We're in our fifth year now here in the market, and we're still learning through some of these things. Originally, right back in the day when I first launched here, I thought, look, if I could just get California, that's a bigger economy than the whole of Australia. So I'll just focus on California. I can double my Australian business, and we launched 30 Whole Food stores in North California, and we started to go that. And that worked well for, 6 to 8 months until Wellmune called and said, Matt, we really love your brand. We want to put it into all of our stores. So suddenly I had to make a decision. Do I sort of, want to stick to California, or do I want to take opportunity? So we decided to go into Wegmans and sort of to open up, other DCs across the country there. And then after 2 years, we thought, look, Walmart's trying to get into Better For You. Maybe we should just have a chat with them and come up with a 2-year plan about how we could move into Walmart and things like that. And then, a month after our initial meeting with them, they rang us back and said, look, we want to put you into 4,500 stores across the country. Are you okay with that? And sort of, we launched there as well. So you can have all these great plans about what we wanted to do, but we also wanted to sort of take advantage of opportunities where they come. We've made some mistakes, definitely, in the last couple of years where we've probably outreached a little bit. But by and large, we're now in 11,000 stores across the country, and majority of those are in the natural channel. But we're now starting to make our move into more conventional. So we launched in HEB this year. Wegmans, I mentioned, we're picking up 1,000 plus Kroger stores next year as we start to do that. So we've really proved ourselves out in the natural, like a lot of brands, and also dabbled in conventional and shown that Walmart 4 years later, you're still with them. We're still national. We're growing at 100% with them. So we know that our brand can cross over and work with consumers in conventional as well. It's just been about having the right time and resources to fully commit to that jump over.
Yeah, and those resources can be pretty limited when you're talking about 3 different retailers representing essentially 3 different channels: Wegmans and sort of specialty, Whole Foods and natural, and Walmart and conventional. You mentioned sort of overreaching. Did you ever sense that there was an opportunity where you should have said no? Did you feel like that was a really tough thing to say to a retailer, especially one as big as Walmart?
Yeah, we've had to say it, and other times maybe we should have. We haven't been in too many situations like that, which has been fortunate. So we've made it work, or thankfully we haven't had to support it as much, and it's gone well. I mean, that's been one of the great things about our product, particularly when we launched through the natural channel. We were the only canister chip out there. Our product doesn't need a lot of education, doesn't need a lot of sort of support. So we don't do demos, we don't do any of that stuff. So even where maybe we've gone a bit over ahead of our skis, thankfully, the brand has still responded, and consumers have really taken to it and have been able to sort of grow from there without having to over invest. So it's been a good thing around our brand as well.
So from what I'm hearing, just retail placement and distribution is a big part of your marketing strategy, in that if you have the brand on shelf, people are going to know what it is and interested in trying it.
Definitely. I mean, that will change a bit more as we go into conventional, and we'll have to start doing some of those demos and getting it in people's mouths and things like that. But, we know that if we can get it on shelves, if we can promote, people pick it up. We see after every just TPR we do a 10% increase in our baseline, every single time we do it. So we know that when people try our product, they'll come back and they'll keep buying and they'll do it. So that's just been our biggest thing, is get it in front of their faces, get it into their mouths, and we can grow that way, definitely.
Was it best to merchandise the product in the salty snack set next to other products like a Pringles, like a Doritos, etc., or were you better served in natural sets within conventional?
Yeah, like it's something we're still working through a bit. So when we go into obviously natural, there isn't any other canister chips really. So we stand alone in the snack set and we perform well there. So look, at the end of the day, Ray, we want to be the number two canister chip here in the whole of the US. And so that means we need to be up against Pringles and up in their canister set there and where people shop for that. So that's where we go into and that's proved to be successful so far.
Matt, when I recall the communication about your brand early on, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, gluten-free was a big part of the messaging, right? Why was that the case? And it doesn't really seem to be the case as much these days.
Yeah, it's a good point. So unless you're celiac or following a gluten-free diet, you might not know that most other canister chips are not gluten-free. So Pringles, for example, our product will be unique in canister chips where it's not like a potato chip where you just cut it and fry it and there shouldn't be gluten. We're made from potato flour and it's almost like a pasta mixture that's sort of done. So you can add things in there. And so people add flour and fillers and other cheaper ingredients to make their product cheaper. And so we end up with a lot of gluten in these type of products. So it is actually a really separating factor of ours that we don't use any of those fillers. We don't use flour. We just predominantly use potato. So that was really to some degree, low-hanging fruit for us as we got out there. And it continues to be important. But as our consumer base has grown, so has our messaging. I mean, we're, other than our cheese flavors, we're, top allergen-friendly, all the top allergens-free. We're, non-GMO. We don't use any artificial flavors. We're really good for people that are looking for sort of just better for you lifestyle and all of that stuff. So our messaging has grown to encapsulate those people as well. We have learned over the years as well, though, that it's really important to remain specific in your niches as well with your communications on social media. So we still talk about gluten-free and we hit that really hard within that niche, but we also talk about, as I said, allergen-free, and we go into that niche. We go into sort of people that, can't have soy or whatever, and we talk about the fact that we're soy-free in that niche, and we really try and niche down in our communications. But overall, on a macro level, we do tend to appeal to a broader audience. As I said, we want to be the number two canister chip. So that's not just the gluten-free. That's all, everyday Americans and talking to them about feeling better about the snacks they buy is our macro message.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the best forms of communication is the most obvious one. It's front of pack. What does your label look like? And your label has gone through, and your brand has gone through a pretty significant evolution, changed up your look about 2 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, early 2020. So about, 18 months ago.
Yeah. It looks, and sorry for, I hope this doesn't come across as rude, but it looks significantly better than your original packaging.
I'm glad.
Yeah. I think when I look at it, and I think I mentioned this to you before, it comes across as much more inviting and fun. It's like a fun snack, much more than it was. I think there was a little bit more of a functional angle to it.
Yeah.
I think there was actually an actual photo of a potato on your old package. Is that?
I don't think there was, but you'd be forgiven for thinking that there was. And it's a fair point. I mean, when I first launched, I was obsessed with this idea of we have to be a healthy Pringle, like we talked about earlier, and sort of how am I going to get this message across that we're healthier and all of this. And I definitely went too far that way, and we missed that whole element you were talking around fun and taste and engaging. So people would look at us and probably, to your early point, that's how we got this idea of a knockoff, because we sort of looked a bit private label. We looked like a bit of a knockoff. And so when I got here in 2019, it was one of the first things I realized now that I was living here and could shop it day in, day out, that we were getting lost on shelf. Our packaging was muted. It didn't invite you to pick it up. And secondly, as well, we only had two flavors. So in a whole, category, a whole sea of bag chips, there was just these two little canisters sitting in the middle, and we were really getting lost. So we wanted to go through and try and change that all up and fix some of those issues.
So was the primary reason to change up the packaging and undergo a rebrand, was it very much about going into conventional and expanding upon your presence in conventional, or was it just we needed a whole refresh in terms of what we were doing, one that represented more of what we currently are and less of what we had been in terms of our vision and thinking about the brand?
As much as we do as a strategy about, hey, we're going to win in natural and then move over to conventional, we don't see ourselves like that as a brand evolution. I mean, as I said, we see ourselves as helping everyday Americans feel good about their snack. So we think about the conventional consumer just as we do about the natural consumer. So that does play a part in it, but I don't know if it was as specific as, hey, we need a rebrand to win in conventional. We just needed to rebrand to bring out what was on the inside up to the outside of our pack. And to be honest, Ray, it's been phenomenal, the response. I mean, I've always known that packaging is important, of course, but once we rebranded and launched in sort of March, April of last year, where nothing else changed, just our packaging, we've seen 200% increases in our sales from having more SKUs, that shelf presence, but also just people seeing us and picking us up. And then, as I talked about, we know if they pick us up, they'll come back and keep buying us. So it's been one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah, I would agree. It's certainly one of the best things I've seen you do since you launched in the United States. One of the other great things that you've done since you've been here is launch a line of cheese balls. Talk about a conventional snack. I mean, there's one brand, it's Planters out there, that was the original cheese ball. We've seen some other brands come out with a similar product as well. How long has that been in planning, and what was the process behind launching cheese balls versus, say, another salty snack?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, we don't see ourselves as a platform snack brand and going to be out everywhere. This is a really strategic thing for us. When we look at the canister chip set, which is a specific set in store, they have canister chips and then they have sort of some canister snacks. And cheese balls is the second largest one of those. So it was this idea of, well, this is already in our category. It's already our consumers. We play very heavily in millennial families. They're buying this. Exactly what we've done with Pringles. Why can't we do it with Planters there as well and have a better for you canister snack here in this cheese ball format as well? So that was the rationale around us. It's always been there in the wings of something that we wanted to do to build out. But to your point around timing, we wanted to make sure that we had earned our spot on shelf, so that we had, we talked about we only had 2 flavors, so we launched another 3 flavors early last year. So we had the full 5 out there that really gave us the presence. We showed that we could exceed, that there was no cannibalization when we put our new flavors in. In fact, all of our SKUs lifted when we put it in. We're continuing to perform over our COVID spike. We're 60-70% up. So now that we're sort of showing that we can bring value to a consumer, to a retailer, now's the time that we can go to them and say, hey, here's something else. The other side of it as well is, for some of these natural stores now, we've been, in their store for 3-4 years. They've had, 2 flavors now all of our flavors now for 2 years. So it becomes about, just shelf presence. And they're saying to us, Matt, I don't know if I've got another room to put another flavor in of a chip or another flavor of this. There's only so much room. So when we go to them and talk about, hey, well, here's something that's similar but a little bit different that we can bring some incremental value to your category, that becomes a lot more interesting to them. And that's proven to be the case as we go out and talk to retailers this last month.
When do you initially have that conversation about a brand extension, and who do you share it with? Because you have, it seems like, some pretty strong retail customers, and I wonder if a retail buyer might be a little miffed that you didn't share your new product line with them initially. I mean, do you have to do it with all of them at the same time, or how does that work?
Yeah, we try to sort of show everyone and let them know. I mean, the other side of it as well is I think if you're coming to a retailer with a finished product, it's probably a couple of months late. So we when we're talking to them, like, a year before the review, we're saying, hey, we're presenting these 4 products to you today, but just letting you know these are in the wings. This is what we're working on. This is how we see the vision of our brand. And so, for most of our key retailers, they've known about this for the last 18 months or so, as we've talked about it and involved in them with that process. So we don't tend to sort of take it specifically to one retailer, but just sort of involve all of our retailers and let them know as part of our presentations over the years.
Mm-hmm. The cheese balls are also interesting in that they have an added functional benefit to them. They have an immunity boosting ingredient that's part of the recipe. Why? Why do cheese balls need function?
Yeah, well, this is something I've been thinking about when I moved here as well. So since 2019 is part of what we're doing. We spoke to all of our customers as part of all of our branding and our messaging. And I kept talking about, hey, we're taking all of the nasty stuff out, we're taking all the fillers and the artificial and the chemicals and everything out. And I was just thinking, well, why aren't we putting good stuff back in? I mean, it's one thing to take the bad stuff out, but can we go that next level and put something good back in? And so even right back then when I came there, I started talking to consumers and to families. And most of our customers are, as I said, millennial families with young kids, about what's important to them and what do they look for and what's pain points for them. And being a father of myself with 3 young daughters, it was also, I was asking myself that question. And the thing that kept coming up was around sort of immunity. So this is well before COVID and all of those things, which obviously now it's important. But families have been dealing with, colds and sicknesses flowing through schools and getting sick all the time. And, it sort of is a never-ending cycle of sort of colds and flus that go through. It's a real pain point for families. So we thought, if we can help boost immunity and put some good stuff back in, that's maybe an important role that we can play, as well as taking the bad stuff out. So that's what we did, and we planned on it. And then obviously it's become quite fashionable at the moment to do it sort of an even more top of mind for the rest of the world with these COVID issues. But for families, immunity's been an important thing, well before COVID was around.
Yeah, and you have a personal story behind, introducing immunity function into these products as well. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, no, you're right, Ray. That was the other thing that got me realising just how important our immunity system is. So my youngest daughter Beatrix, when she was a couple of weeks old, was diagnosed with a very, very aggressive form of leukemia. So we spent a couple of years in the hospital and going through chemo treatments. And, if you're familiar, chemo just wipes out all of your blood cells, all of your immunity and things like that. And so my wife and I would sit there with our blood test, after that, and just watching the neutrophils, which is your immunity, sort of be zero. And any little time that they came back up, that just meant that, Trixie, our daughter, had made it through another round, and now she can fight the illnesses on herself. We're so worried that she was going to die of a cold or something like that between these things. So I became very, very familiar with just how important our immune system is and the amazing life that it brings and allows us to have. So that was the other side of it when I was looking into this as well, and we use Wellmune, which is essentially an immunity booster that supercharges the neutrophils and helps them to do their work. And so that was the other element I was thinking about this is, it's something that I know firsthand is so important, and how can we help in that area as well?
Everything that you just shared with me is very moving and very motivating to buy your salty snack, to buy your cheese balls versus another variety, a natural or otherwise, or another brand, natural or otherwise. That being said, I wonder, did you undertake much research or a lot of research when you were looking at this opportunity? I mean, do consumers at the end of the day really buy your product because it has this added function associated with it? Did they say, initial research that this is a reason, or at least a part of the reason why they would be buying your product over another?
Yeah, it's a tough one, Ray, because you don't think, I'm going to eat a tin of cheese balls so I don't get sick. That sort of is a bit counterintuitive. So we're being careful about it as well. I think what our research showed, and particularly now that we're launched as well, is, hey, I didn't necessarily know about Wellmune or immunity booster, but the fact that you thought to put it in, and the fact that it's there, shows that you understand me as a consumer, shows that you know what's important to me, and that you're trying to do something about it to make my life better. And that's sort of what we were going for. We're not a functional food snack company. That's sort of not what we are, but it's more about how can we just sort of help families out. So that's been the overwhelming feedback we're glad it's there. We appreciate what you're doing, and we think it's good that you're even thinking about that, rather than the alternatives that are out there on the conventional side.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because on the one hand, if you say you're too healthy, or if you say you have too much function, associated with your product, people are like, oh, it's not going to taste great, because that's traditionally been what the issue has been with functional foods and functional beverages is, oh, it has this benefit, it must not taste great. So I can understand why or how difficult it is to sort of toe that line. That being said, taste is going to be the biggest factor in anytime you're snacking or anytime you're eating or drinking, period. When you're comparing the texture and the flavor of a product that people are used to one that you're creating, how close do you have to be? Are consumers willing to give you a little bit of leeway, knowing that your product is going to be better for them?
I think they are, but back to my earlier point is we wouldn't be happy with that. We don't give ourselves any leeway on that. We have to be the best tasting snack out there. We have to taste better than the market leader. Otherwise, there's no point doing this. I think for us, we look at a bit of background. The Good Crisp company, I have it broken up into three pillars, and it's good taste, good ingredients, and good vibes is how I look at our brand. And I specifically have put good taste before good ingredients, which is strange for a better for you snack company and things like that. You would think ingredients would be the first thing. And it's not to say that they're not important. Of course they are. It's the whole reason we do this, but we cannot sacrifice taste on that. We have to taste better than anything out there. Now, we're not going to look. Some things we do sacrifice. So, like, for example, the bright orange color. I'm not going to go and use artificial colors to get this, match this amazing color. Our ball isn't perfectly round every time because we sort of, we don't use all these sort of fillers to get it all right and perfectly. So I think people will be forgiving in some of those side of things, and they would prefer that rather than having this perfect machine-made thing every time. But we won't sacrifice on taste, and that has to be the most important thing for us. Otherwise, we're not a snack brand.
Mm-hmm. You guys are growing really quickly. A lot of growth over the past couple of years that you referred to, a lot of growth over the past 12, 18 months. Yet your team is still relatively small for a company that's expanding as quickly as you guys are. A team of 7, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. We've hired 2 people in the last 12 months, so there's 7 of us now.
So when you're thinking about expanding the team, how do you consider what you need? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things you guys need, but how do you think about what's most pressing in terms of those needs, and how do you identify the talent for those positions?
Yeah, look, it's a tricky one, and we're still getting our head around it as well as we start to hire more and get into that. I think you don't necessarily need a big team to start in CPG is what we've learned. I mean, there's really great support like brokers. We use Presence and they're amazing and they're boots on the ground. And so we can do a lot with just a very small sales team and utilize our partners and do a lot of that, same with 3PLs and co-mans and all of those things like that. So I tend to look at it as how can we sort of walk someone into a role? And by that, I mean, how do we sort of at least build up so we're doing at least 30 or 40% of their job for them, so that when we bring someone in, there's already a role there and then they can explode and bring in that sort of extra 60% or whatever it is for their role and make that happen. So it does mean that for small periods of time we're probably understaffed as we sort of try and make sure there's enough work and a very clear understanding of what this person is, and then we bring them in and that then expands for us. Now, as to your point, as you grow quickly and speed becomes an issue, we can't do as much of that. But that's typically how we've looked at it today and sort of really clearly identify what those roles are and what they bring to it, and being clear about it as well as this is what we want to do from a strategic perspective. As someone who's come in from Australia and outside of the industry and all of that, I tend to have some fresh eyes around it, and we don't just do it because, hey, this is what everyone does. You get a VP of sales and you get an East and a West director, and then you go this and you go down. That's just the way you do it. We tend to think about it a bit differently, and how long can we go without having to sort of hire people, but without sacrificing our speed and our growth as well. So it's a tricky balance that we're still trying to get a handle on.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I mean, if outsourcing has worked for you, and you mentioned a few different things in terms of brokerage and logistics and co-manufacturing, if it's working for you, great. Then again, those folks don't really have skin in the game as much as some employees might, especially those that you are offering equity to, or at least the potential for equity in the company. Do in-house folks, do you see a level of care that that you should expect out of them versus outsourced folks? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, especially with early stage brands, it feels like there has to be a passion for the company, for the brand, for what you're doing, more than just, getting a paycheck. Whereas, with outsourced companies, it is a paycheck. It is money. They don't really, they don't necessarily need to love your brand. So I guess how are you thinking about that long term? Filling in those gaps where you are hiring as much for passion as you are for talent.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think an in-house person is always going to be better than sort of a fractional person or outsourcing that. But it just comes down to resource allocation. Like, yes, I would love to have everyone in-house and everyone passionate and everyone doing it, but equally as well as a young brand, we don't have all the resources to do all of that. And so there's an element where we have to outsource for a while until we feel comfortable that we can bring that in-house and then benefit from that passion and that focus as well. I think there's also an element of education as well that happens. We look at our business, even with partners that we use or service providers or whatever, we tend to go through this leveling up process where we start with sort of someone small and it helps us internally to learn. I mean, take ecom, for example, that's blown up for most sort of CPG brands, and we're all scrambling to learn it and things like that from last year. So we probably weren't ready to bring someone in-house to start with because I didn't know enough about it. Alex, our VP of marketing, didn't know enough about it. So we outsource, we learn, and then we outgrow that person and we go to a slightly bigger agency and we learn some more, and then maybe we go to a bigger agency and until we get to the point where we know that there's enough work there for someone. We know that there's opportunity, that we put money behind it, it's going to work. And it also allows us to be skilled enough in that hiring process so that when we do hire an in-house person, we actually know that they know what they're talking about, and we can at least talk the lingo and help them. So there's lots of different factors in all of that I think go into when's the right time to bring someone in-house. I think we're getting to that point now where we can start to bring some of these roles in-house and further grow next year.
It sounds like you've learned a lot about the business of food production, manufacturing, sales, marketing, etc., over the last 5 years. As a CEO, are those the biggest lessons? Are those the most important lessons that you've learned? Is the actual running of a business, or has it been something else? Has it been related to leadership or vision, things like that? Because on our podcast, we do talk a lot about leadership and vision. But at the end of the day, the nuts and bolts of running a company are a big part, maybe the biggest part of what makes a business successful.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I think it's also around this role of this founder CEO type sort of role. When you be sort of a founder and grow up into a CEO type thing as well, I think they are two very different roles. That's why we sort of tend to spell them out differently on our business cards, because they're not the same thing. And I think to start with, you're a founder and you're doing a lot of that work and you're scrappy and you're helping, you just to your point a little bit, sort of just going out and doing it all and the nuts and the bolts of just making it all happen. But as you start to then hire and bring people in and build out a team and all that, you need to become less of a founder hands-on and maybe more of a founder leader and a CEO type role as well, which becomes around managing people and teams and projects and cash flow and all of those other really important things that sort of you just pushed off for the first few years. So I find myself a little bit in that position now, right? To your point, so we've learned a lot. We're now sort of 5 years old. We're starting to get a bit more established here. And this is all new stuff to me as well. I've never had to run a team or do these things or manage people or work it out. I mean, I'm very blessed that our employees are just amazing. And there's very little that I actually have to do on that side, which is good because I'm learning and making it up as I go along. But I definitely feel more of those responsibilities and those things that I need to learn, as well as sort of the founder stuff that I did at the beginning.
There's such a great story here about challenger brand that is growing in a way that sort of defies the odds. I mean, as we talked about earlier, this idea has been there and people have taken advantage of the opportunity, but no one's really sort of broken through. And it's just remarkable to see what you've accomplished to date. Is the goal at this point to align with the strategic company, or do you kind of just want to see this thing grow as much as it can?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I see that as the future of this company. I mean, coming once again from Australia, we don't have this huge VC sort of type, build them up and sell them and, pump and dump, not that brands do that, but that sort of mentality. So I've come in just with, how do I build this amazing brand that can last, go the long term and has all the fundamentals in place? And what will be down the future will be, and we'll work out there, but I'm not building towards that. I mean, we've got a great partner in Circle Up and some other investors. And so we have gone down that path, but it's not something I necessarily focus on. It's more about, how do we build and fill out the opportunity of this brand? I think a saying that I have, or that we have in the company, is, just don't stuff this up. Like, I think the opportunity is there. This brand is amazing. What we're just trying to do and take on, there's $1 billion sort of Pringles, and we can be the challenger to that. It's all there. All I have to do is just try not to stuff this opportunity up. So that's what I'm focusing on.
Well, I don't think you're doing that. I think you're definitely taking advantage of the opportunity in a very intelligent way. And this has been such a great conversation reflecting that. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you helping me to fill my cabinets with better for you snacks, because I was not a good snacker back in the day, and having your chips on hand, your cheese balls on hand is a godsend. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. I really appreciate chatting.